Hey everyone, welcome to my channel, Kindred Souls of Brooklyn. And today we're going to talk about how the Hero sandwich got its name. Why New Yorkers, why Brooklynites like myself call it a Hero sandwich as opposed to, say, a grinder or a submarine or any kind of other thing like hoagie, which comes, So stay tuned. I hope you enjoy the video. One thing great about living in the United States, living in America, is the fact that there's so many different accents. For someone like me, it takes about 10 seconds to find out where I'm from. The biggest guess is, Bronx, maybe Staten Island, but they narrow it to Brooklyn pretty darn quickly. But if you don't have an accent like mine, then a good barometer that people might use when you order a sandwich would be what you actually call it. So, believe it or not, the word from Hero in Brooklyn, we always call it a Hero. That's how I grew up with it was. And believe it or not, it has an interesting origin to it. A lady named Clementine Paddleworth actually coined the term in 1936. She was a writer for the Herald Tribune, and of course all of these sandwiches were big, and she said that in order to eat this entire sandwich, you had to be a hero. So it stuck. So in New York City, Brooklyn, Staten Island, we pretty much call them heroes. But basically there's other things that people might call it too. So if you come from Jersey, as for instance, you might call it a hoagie. If you come from, say, New England somewhere, you're calling it a grinder. So all kinds of interesting things to think about. But like I said, it's a very good gauge as to where you come from. So how did this sandwich actually take hold? Well, essentially, so typically, how did these sandwiches really start? Well, basically, all of these sandwiches really originated from dock workers. Pretty much it was the Italian, the Irish dock workers that worked. If you think about where all these sandwiches get their names from, think about Connecticut, think about New York, think about New England, all along those places, New Jersey. They're all port towns. So these sandwiches typically were these long, elongated sandwiches that were meant to fill up these guys during the course of the day, and so they wouldn't be hungry till dinner time. So essentially, depending on where you were from, they actually got called something very different. So now, essentially, if you go out to order something now, like in a sandwich shop, it's funny because, like I said, people will walk in and they'll say, "Let me have a torpedo, let me have a sub." Typically, it's a sub. You don't hear the word torpedo much anymore. But the word submarine, the word torpedo, of course, it originates from, again, it's dock workers. What does that sandwich typically look like? It looks like a submarine. That's what they call it, a submarine sandwich. So this is where these things come from. And it's really interesting because down in Florida, it's kind of a mixture of all different kinds of people. So I'd have to say down here, it's pretty much subs. So you have like Jersey Mike's is down here. So of course you're calling it subs. Firehouse Subs is another big one down here, and they call it subs. So again, if you don't have an accent like mine, then if you want to tip where you're from, just say grinder or sub or hoagie or torpedo. And I think torpedo was a little bit more like Toledo. You guys could kind of let me know about that. But again, that's one we don't usually hear too often. So I'd really be interested, folks, in you kind of writing me and kind of just putting a comment on the video here. Let me know where you grew up. And let me know what they call it in your neck of the woods. Do you come from somewhere in the Midwest? Do you come from somewhere like on the West Coast? What do you call them over there? I'd be really interested to know how the history went as far as those sandwiches go, as far as where you grew up. And like I said, though, if you come to New York, you come to Brooklyn, get ready to say hero. We do have Jersey Mike's in Brooklyn, and it's kind of like, you think of a sub, it kind of goes well. We had the Brooklyn Navy Yard growing up in Brooklyn all through World War II, World War I. In fact, the Entenmann's cake, the blackout cake, was named after the reason it was called the blackout cake was because they used to black out the lights, because back in those days, when the battleships would slip out of the harbor, they didn't want spies or knowing that they were leaving. So a lot of things originated, a lot of names originated in big cities like New York and Chicago. But I'd be really interested to know what they call it where you live. Maybe Puerto Rico. What do they call them in Puerto Rico? I'd really be interested to know that. So while I was sitting here, someone just asked me to explain what a grinder, how the grinder got its name. So the grinder is from New England, and essentially that got its name from, sandwiches have always been kind of like you bring like your leftovers. You think of like a hero today, you go to a deli in New York, and that's like the perfect thing. But a lot of times sandwiches have always been just like the leftover meat or leftover things from dinner or from something else. So because a lot of times they were leftovers, they were hard to really eat or pull apart. So you'd have to grind your teeth to kind of eat them. So that's how grinders got their name. Sometimes, people eating the bread, they would be grinding it and pulling it with their teeth. So that's how the grinder got its name. So I hope you enjoyed that little video on the history of some sandwiches and why in New York we call things certain things. I hope to continue this as a series. So, who knows? I think it'd be fun. So talk to you soon. Subscribe if you can. And drop me a line if you want. I'd love to hear what you call sandwiches back where you live. And don't forget, you go to Brooklyn or go to New York City, ask for a hero. All right. Love you guys. Have a good night. Take care. Bye-bye.